There's no denying that we are in an unprecedented housing crisis. From the inner cities to the regions, people are being forced to sleep in cars or tents, families are being priced out of their rental homes, and students and young people are languishing in overcrowded share houses. Each day, a new horror strikes. It hits the headlines, and people are finally waking up to the reality that so many in our community, including the Greens, have been pointing out for years, that the private housing system is broken. But it didn't break overnight. Choices by successive state and federal governments on both sides of the aisle to prioritise profits of their big developer and investor mates have contributed to the dire situation we face today in Newtown and across New South Wales. In the past fortnight, I welcome the new government's beginning the process of progressing solutions. We welcome the audit of government-owned land that can be used for housing and the freeze of public housing sales in recognition of the fact that selling off public housing in the midst of a housing crisis is not the answer. But we push back on the eagerness to rely on market solutions only to solve market problems. The Greens reject the ideas that institutional investors will radically improve the situation for renters, that high-rises are the silver bullet to the lack of affordable housing, and that building more private supply alone without also boosting public housing is a way out of this crisis. And we wholeheartedly reject any extension of the Coalition's previous government's logic that the only way to increase housing supply and public housing is by demolishing and privatising existing public housing and breaking apart communities that call them home. Handing over any percentage of public land to a private developer is privatisation. No matter how you spin it, that is what it is. Most of all, we push back on the idea that the burden for tackling the housing crisis should fall anywhere other than on the government. Whether it's the NIMBYs, the migrants, the international students, the international investors, the rich Chinese developers, every week we seem to hear that there is someone else to blame for the housing crisis. Governments are responsible, and they cannot continue to shift the blame. From flogging off public housing to private developers and transferring LAC property to community housing providers to touting private supply solutions like build to rent, the government needs to stop outsourcing responsibility for addressing the housing crisis and start taking accountability. Hopefully that is what we see from this new government. Do we want to combat the NIMBYs? Absolutely. And address the housing affordability crisis in the meantime? Let's roll out inclusionary zoning now and make it mandatory for all new private developments to have at least 30% affordable housing as a condition of their development consent. And if we want to address the massive shortage in public housing supply, currently over 50,000 approved applicants on the public housing waiting list that are waiting for homes that don't exist, then we need to investigate sustainable solutions for boosting supply that don't require demolishing existing estates and instead look at things like infill, refurbishing the 3,000 plus public housing dwellings that are sitting empty across the state. And if we want to stop investors siphoning properties away from the long-term rental market and turning them into short-term letting, we need to empower councils to cap and regulate short-term rentals based on community need and rental vacancies, and implement an empty properties tax on rentals to be able to be used and stop them being used in this way. None of these solutions are new. They've all been rolled out in other jurisdictions, in other countries and around the world, where they've had a significant impact on bringing the housing situation back under control. The Greens want to see an end to a narrative, whether it's peddled by the media or even today in the chamber by the planning minister in this place during question time, that the community opposing development or the former government are solely to blame for the lack of housing affordability in this state. We want to bring the focus back here, to the future, to what we can do in this place together right now to work constructively to solve and end the housing crisis that has been allowed to fester for too long. The change in government means we have an opportunity to finally act. But that means we need to put developers in their place. We need to strengthen the protection for renters, and we need to radically reimagine the housing market so that we are once again putting people before profit.